Click here to subscribe our channel and do not forget to press the bell icon to get regular updates of our videos. Hello friends, good evening to all of you. So I am back with another video on sociology optional subject for UPSC CSE mains examination. In this video we are going to cover the middle classes in India under the social classes in India. So friend, please do these 3 hours. It will really motivate me to continue this awesome course. Share as much as possible so that more and more people will get benefited. Comment and like the video and ask any doubt if you have. And now you can also follow us on FB page, that is facebook.com/Unorthodox Academy. So friend, as you know that we are covering slot 3, that is stratification, caste and class. In paper 1 we have finished the topic 5, that is stratification mobility. In paper 2 we are at presently covering the social classes in India. We have already covered the caste system. And in this video we are going to cover the topic C, that is middle classes in India. We have already covered agrarian class structure and the industrial class structure. So before understanding middle classes in India, we have to understand the middle class in theory. So the first thing is that the classical sociological thinkers like Karl Marx and Max Weber have written a great deal on the concept of class. So basically class was the most important category for Marx in his analysis of Western society, or we can say in Europe, and in his theory of social change. So basically Marx's model of class is a dichotomous one. So basically he used, or basically it is through the concept of class that he explains the exploitation of subordinate categories by the dominant categories. So according to Marx, in every class society there are two fundamental classes. The first one are the propertied one, or the second one which we can say as have-nots. So property relations constitute the axis of this dichotomous system. So a minority of non-producers who hold the means of productions are able to use these positions of the dominant category to extract or to control the means of productions, and they are able to use this position of control to extract from the majority of producers the surplus product, which is the source of their livelihood. So classes in the Marxian framework are thus defined in terms of their relationship of groupings of individuals to the means of production. So for the Marx model, economic domination is tied to political domination too, because if you are dominant in the economics perspective, then you can also be said as you have dominant in the political perspective. So the control of means of production yields political control. So in this dichotomous model of class structure, the position of middle class is only transitional. The middle class for Marx were the self-employed peasants and the petty bourgeois. So they were so described because they continued to own the means of productions they worked without employing wage labor. So Marx predicted that these middle class were destined to disappear as the capitalist system of production developed. So only the two major classes, that is proletariat or the working class, and the bourgeois or the capitalists, we can say also them as non-working class, were the significant in the Marxian framework of class relations. So the other theories of class have assigned much more significance to the middle class, and the foremost of these have been the sociologists like Max Weber, Dahrendorf and Lockwood. So then Max Weber now agrees with Marx that classes are essentially defined in economic terms. His overall treatment of the concept is quite different from the Marx. So unlike Marx, Max Weber argues that the classes develop only in the market economics, in which individuals compete for economic gains. So he defines classes as a group of people who share similar position in the market economy, and by the virtue of this fact receive similar economic reward. So thus class status of a person in Weber's terminology is his market situations, or in other words his purchasing power. So the class status of a person also determines his life chances, and their economic position or class situations determines how many of the things considered desirable in their society they can buy. So now, like Marx, Weber also uses the criteria of property ownership for defining classes. So his theory provides a much greater scope for discussions of the middle class. He agrees with the Marx that the two main classes in capitalist society are the property owning class and the non-property owning class. So, however, Weber does not treat all the non-property owning individuals as belongings to a single class of the proletariats. The class situations of the non-property owners differs in terms of their skills. So, those who possesses skills that have a definite market value, for example, doctors, engineers, and other professionals, are rewarded better than the unskilled laborers. So, thus, their class situation is different that of the working class, and in the Weberian framework, they constitute the middle class. So, further, unlike Marx, Weber does not see any tendency towards polarization of society into two classes. So, on the contrary, Weber argues that with the development of capitalism, the white-collar middle class tend to expand rather than contract. So, then the later sociologists have tend to follow the Weberian line of thinking is their discussions and the studies on the concept of middle class. Then later sociologists has made a crucial distinction is made in the sociological literature between the old middle classes and the new middle classes. So that the term old middle class is used in the sense in which Marx had used the term the petty bourgeois, or basically those who worked with their own means of production, such as traders, independent professionals, and farmers. So the term new middle class is broadly used to describe the skilled or white collared workers, salaried employees, and the self-employed professionals. So even though they do not own the means of production they work with, but they are also distinct from the unskilled blue collar workers. So their income being much higher than that of blue collar workers, they can lead a lifestyle that is very different from that of the working class. So now we see the rise of middle class in India. So basically it can be divided into two parts, that is in pre-independence and post-independence. So in pre-independence, the middle class emerged for the first time in the Western Europe with the development of industrial and the urban economy. And the term middle class was initially used to describe the newly emerging class of bourgeois, or we can say industrial class. So basically the term bourgeois means industrial class or the industrial capitalist, and later on the term was used for social groups placed in between the industrial bourgeois on the one side and the working class on the other side, that is the skilled professionals. So in the historical context of the development of middle class India is quite different from that of West. So basically it was in the 19th century under the patronage of British colonial rule that the middle class began to emerge in India. So though they emerged under the patronage of the British rulers, the middle class played an important role in the India's struggle for independence from the colonial rule, and during the post-independence period also, the middle classes have been instrumental in shaping the policies of economic development and social changes being pursued by the Indian state. So the British colonial rule in India was fundamentally different from all the earlier political system that we can say that the empires that existed before the colonial rule. The British not only established their rule over most part of the subcontinent, they also transformed the economy and polity of the regions. So apart from changing the land revenue systems, they introduced modern industrial economy in the region. They reorganized the political and administrative structure and introduced Western ideas and cultural values to the Indian people. So as pointed out by the B.V. Mishra, the peculiar feature that distinguishes the Indian middle class from their counterpart is in the West is in the context of their origins. So both have different origins. So in the West, the middle classes emerged basically as a result of economic and technological changes. They were for the most part engaged in trade and industry, and in India on the contrary, they emerged more in the consequence of changes in the system of law and public administration than in the economic development, and they mainly belong to the learned professions. Then Sanjay Joshi, in his study of making of the middle class in colonial India, attempted to explain why traditional sociological indicators of income and occupation cannot take us very far in the understanding of category of middle class. So though the economic background of the middle class was important, the power and the constitutions of the middle class in India was based not on the economic power it wielded, but which was minimal, but on the stability of its members to be cultural entrepreneurs. So being middle class was primarily a project of self-fashioning. Joshi articulated that the definitions and the power of middle class from its proposition of modern ways of life, heterogeneity was an attribute of the middle class. So the rapid expansions of a new middle class in the India during the last decade of the 20th century and its increasing influence in the many parts of the public sphere constitute one of the most important changes in contemporary history. Then the Path Chatterjee basically argues that the Indian middle class in the colonial context had a paradoxical positions. So the middle class was culturally invented through colonial education, English educations, or we can say basically effect of the Macaulay education policy, yet structurally it is limited as it lacked a basis for economic expansion in the context of colonial economic control. So it was never a bourgeois as in the West. So hence it was not a fundamental class in Chatterjee's opinion, as it made no attempts at social transformations. And in fact, the existing social structure mutated itself to constitute the new middle class. The requirement of English educations for entry into the hallowed circle of the middle class means that the upper caste Indian with traditional access to education could exploit the opportunities and become the middle class. So in the process, it acquired a class identity without losing its caste structure. So then Pavan Kumar Verma, in his book The Great Indian Middle Class, wrote that the emergence of middle class in India started due to the Macaulay education policy, who wanted to create a Babu class who can be Britishers in their taste and Indian in skin. So he also found that at the initial middle class in India who was developed from the caste system. So the upper caste, especially Brahmins, converted as the first middle class, but as the modern education spread among the other castes, they later joined along with the Brahmins in the middle class structures. So hence the first middle class India was the upper caste. So now we see the post-independence middle class of India. So in India, the origins of middle class derive not so much from an industrial revolutions as which is in the West, or a democratic revolution as from colonial rule, and in the last 50 years the middle class has grown steadily. So in post-independence era, basically there are 3 decades that are most important. The first one is 1960s, 1980s and 1990s. So in 1960s, due to the abolition of zamindari, land and agrarian reforms, institutional support, agriculture development, spread of the technology, a middle class emerged in the rural India, which is known as the progressive farmers, and along with cultural agriculture, they also involved in brick making, poultry, flour mills, fishery, stockist, etc. So almost 25% farmers holds 60% of the rural land, which can be easily be called as the middle class. Then in 1980s, a middle class emerged among the SC/ST who took the benefits of reservations, modern education, and formed BSP in 1984 for political mobilizations, and Sachidanand called them as the Harijans Allied, or basically the tribal elites. So then after in 1990s, the spread of middle class was revolutionary due to the development in IT sector and the other service sector because of the LPG reforms, that means liberalization, privatization and globalization. So then according to NESCOM and McKinsey, India is responsible for more than 40% of the entire BPO industry, that is business processing outsourcing industry of the world, and 25% of the software professionals of US are the Indians. So basically BPO gives 7 lakh employment directly and 25 lakh indirectly, which can be included as a middle class. So basically commenting on the growing middle class, Guru Charan Das stated that although the middle class is composed of many occupations, commerce has always been at the center, as the businessman mediated between the landed upper classes and the laboring lower class. So, the 20th century witnessed an entrepreneurial surge in the last decade after 1991 and the expansion of the middle class in India in the last 2 decades, that is after 1980s. So after growing at a rate of 3.5% a year from 1950 to 1980, India's economic growth rate is increased to 5.6 in the decade of the 80s, and then it climbed further to the 6.3 in the decade of 1990s, and in these 2 decades the middle class become more than triple, and between 1998 to 2000, $2.5 billion in venture capital funds have came to India, according to McKinsey studies have shown that there is a direct correlation between the availability of venture funds and the proliferation of the business startups. So writing about this middle class, Guru Charan Das argued that as a result of the changing trends, a new kind of entrepreneurs has emerged in India. So as Guru Charan Das notes, although the reforms after 1991 have been slow, hesitant and incomplete, yet they have set in motion a process of profound change in the Indian society. And it is Joseph Schumpeter who coined the term entrepreneur. So contrary to the earlier times, the new millennials today are looked up to with a proud and even reverence. So for they are a new meritocracy and highly educated entrepreneurs, professionals who are creating value by innovating in the global knowledge economy. So now basically before moving to conclusions, I would like to tell you that there are 3 dimensions of middle class. The first dimension is attitude, that is we can also say ideology. So basically the ideology of middle class is of pro changes, that means they change with the time because they believe that as the time passes or as the new changes came, they will directly benefit to them, or basically they are positivists towards the change. Then there is another dimension, that is consumption pattern. So basically Indian middle class is not just grown at a rapid pace, it has also become segment driving consumption of luxury goods. That means they started consuming luxury goods like cars and air conditioners, and it is according to a survey by the National Council of Applied Economic Research, that is NCAER. And I would also like to say that if you are noting these lectures or basically making notes of these, then just draw a line in your page, and if you get any new current affairs data from any bodies for NCRB or from NCAR or any WHO, UNSCR related to any topics of paper 2, because paper 2 is basically focused on the Indian society. So please note any data that will suffice you, or basically that will increase the basically it enhances your answers. So please make that, and also add any data if you get. So as I am telling that the second dimension of middle class is the consumption pattern, and basically they are not able to buy at one time, so they move towards the EMI patterns, or basically they use EMI to buy these branded or luxury goods. So the third one is their occupations, or we can say that the occupational structure. So basically they are middle class are the white collar jobs. That means they are either managers or technicians. And so now we move towards the conclusion. So the middle class have always been among the most influential segment of the modern Indian society. They were never as prominent and visible as they become during the decade of 1990s and after the liberalization process of Indian economy began. So introduction of the new economic policy and increasing globalization of Indian economy brought the Indian middle class into new prominence, and the process of globalization has also generated a lot of debate about the actual size of middle classes in India. So as basically they are projected that there are around 30 crores of middle class in India, or we can say also said that 300 to 350 millions of middle classes in India, but there are a lot of debate about the actual size of middle class in India, their consumption pattern and the pace of their growth in the years to come. So it has also been claim that the size of middle class has grown to 20% of the total Indian populations. Some others have put this figure at the 30%. So though a large number of Indian people still live a life of poverty, it is the middle class that have come to dominate the culture and political life in the Indian society. So basically we can say that middle class in India is highly complex in its characteristics due to differentiation in earning, occupations, lifestyle and orientations. But for the identification, income and occupations are the two important or the prominent criteria on which this class can be identified. So thank you guys for listening and watching this video. Thank you.